Great. Well, for those who were last week, you know that I shared my personal testimony, and then I was, that was always a refreshing joy to share again about the beginnings of my finding Jesus and receiving Him into my life. Lately, though, I've been reading through the Gospel of Mark, and I've read about others' lives that have been changed. If you read the Gospels, you'll see all the different people who met Jesus and how their lives were totally changed. And I always find it good to go back to the Gospels, to read them, and to be reminded again of who Jesus is. Don't you? I mean, those who've been followers of Jesus for a long time. I just like to read the stories again of who He is. So as we focus on Jesus, something incredible happens. In 2 Corinthians 3:18, it says, "We all with unveiled face, beholding as in a mirror the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image from glory to glory, just as from the Lord the Spirit." The result of focusing on Jesus seems to be we are slowly transformed into His image. We become more like Him in our character, in His character. Dallas Willard, a Bible teacher, talks about the quietly transforming friendship of Jesus. And Julian of Norwich in the 16th century, a long time ago, wrote, "The highest joy is to see Him as He is, to feel all the sweetness of His being nourishing our soul." So this morning, I'd like to talk about one of the encounters that Jesus had with a woman who was in great need, found in Mark chapter 5, verses 25 to 34. And I think that every person can find help for the deepest needs they have if they make three choices that we can find in Mark chapter 5, verses 25 to 34. A little bit of the background of what is going on in this section. If you look earlier in the book of Mark, in chapter 4, you'll see that Jesus demonstrated His power over nature in the calming of a storm. These events were placed in these Gospels for a reason. And so we see He has power over nature. And then we see a little bit later that Jesus has power over demonic spirits, where He dealt with a demon-possessed man. And in this section, we see some examples of Jesus having power over death and sickness. So I'll read this passage. It's one of my favorite passages to read and see how He dealt with this woman. But I'll read it out loud. I think it'll be up on the board there. It says in Mark chapter 5, "And a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had, yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind Him in the crowd and touched His cloak, because she thought, 'If I just touch His clothes, I will be healed.' Immediately her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. At once Jesus recognized that power had gone out from Him. He turned around in the crowd and asked, 'Who touched my clothes?' And as you see the people crowding against you," His disciples answered, "and yet you ask, 'Who touched me?'" I was thinking, it sounds like something in Yiddish. You see so many people crowding against you, and you say, "Who touched me?" It sounds like that. But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at His feet, and trembling with fear, told Him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." I'd like to share this morning from this passage three choices that we can make in order to find help for our needs, our deepest needs. The first choice we can make is simply to admit your need. this woman, this person, realized her need. We read in this passage a little bit about her. She was bleeding for 12 years. It was a long-term problem. The scriptures don't clearly say what the medical problem is, but she was looking for a solution. Whatever it was, it made her, according to Leviticus, ritually unclean. It means she had to stay away from others. It also says she suffered a great deal. She sought lots of help from professionals, probably doctors at that time. She spent all she had, no relief. In fact, things got worse. I guess medical bills back then are like today. They can drain our accounts. So she was in a desperate situation, really at the end of her rope. I wonder, with all that's going on today in our world, have you ever felt stressed out like that? Having a need that no one seems to have a solution for. We can read the news, we can listen to the news and see that's going on right now. You do all you can, but the problem stays the same or even gets worse. Maybe it's a sickness you have or one that a family member might have. Money needs, especially now with all the inflation seems to be going up, gas prices seem to be going up. Are you overwhelmed with things that you have to get done? I'm not a person that normally worries much, but I've been waking up in the evening, in the early mornings actually, and my mind begins to obsess with things I have to get done. Even things that I have no control over with various responsibilities I have. And, it happens. We get up, we can't go back to sleep, and we keep thinking over and over what's going on or the future, or what's going to happen, etc. For others, it may be just, a simple job situation that's not secure, or a relationship that's not going well, or I'm sure many of our brothers and sisters in Christ in Ukraine are facing all of these things all at once. And that's often sometimes when trials come. They don't come one at a time. They come in multiple times. But whatever need you or I may be facing, Jesus is a refuge for those in need. Matthew Henry in his commentary says, "You will find him a sure refuge, even if he is your last refuge." And at our lowest points in life, he promises to be there. Jesus said, "These things I have spoken to you so that you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but take courage. I have overcome the world." But if we want help, we must first need to admit our need. We all have different issues we're facing: finances, relationships, loneliness, or health, or something else. In many cases, as I said, it's more than one thing. But we need to realize that at times that our own effort will not be enough to deal with it. Which brings me to the second choice that we can make after admitting our need, is to take a risk, a step of faith. We see in Matthew chapter 5, verses 27 to 29, that the woman reaches out with a hopeful touch to Jesus. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, because she thought, if I just touch his clothes, I will be healed. I made some observations on that little section there, how she went to him. She went to him in a crowd. Ever notice how people can be hurting and they're still surrounded by people? When Sandy and I first came to State College in 1998 from the Philippines, I could walk the entire day on campus, 45,000 people, and not see one person that I knew. And that went on for a number of weeks. It was a lonely time. People can be everywhere, but they may not understand you or know what you're going through. She came in a crowd. She also came from behind, which I wondered, why did she come from behind? And I thought, it can be embarrassing or humbling, especially for men, to admit your needs. Right, men? Now we don't have to ask for directions anymore. We just go to our phone, Or maybe she felt Jesus would charge her a fee, and she'd already been down that road, and she didn't have any money left. Or maybe she was afraid what others would say. What are you doing here? You're unclean. Or that her need wouldn't be taken seriously, like no hope, from what she'd come before, what she'd seen before. Whatever might be the reason, though, she took a risk and went for help one more time. In spite of her feelings of fear and the unknown, she still had this glimmer of hope that there's a possibility. She thought to herself, it says, if I can just touch his clothing, I will be healed. If we're going to have our deepest needs met, we can't let anything stand in our way in order to go to Jesus. Not the crowds that may be choosing a different way, not our fears or embarrassment that what will others say if they see that I have this need, not our pride, which says, I can do it myself. I don't need anyone. We need to take a risk and take a step of faith, a hopeful touch. But, faith alone won't help meet our needs. We need to make another choice, the last choice here. We need to go to the right doctor. In this passage, we see not only a woman in need, but also a powerful healer, Jesus. Earlier in Mark chapter 2, verses 15 to 17, the Pharisees were critical of Jesus because he was eating with a group of sinners at someone's house. Jesus' response to those Pharisees was, it is not those who are healthy who need a physician, but those who are sick. I did not come to call the righteous, but sinners. Jesus is the great physician. He can heal us physically, but most importantly, he can heal us inwardly, where our nature is. Years ago, I tore a ligament in my knee, and I went to an orthopedic surgeon. I didn't go to a cardiologist at that time, because what I needed was the right doctor to treat the specific sickness that I have. And Jesus' specialty is solving unsolvable problems that others may have. In verse 34, Jesus says to the woman in need, daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. You have been healed. No one else could help her until she placed her faith and focus on Jesus. No one else had the answer to her problem until she touched Jesus. No one can give you inner peace except coming from the Prince of Peace. No one can take away your bitterness and anger and an unforgiving attitude except that Savior, Jesus. Some observations I made about Jesus in this passage. For one thing, the woman must have been happy. He doesn't charge a fee for his services. It's free. He feels the touch of those in need, even in a crowd like Penn State, like I experienced there. A follow-up of that story, after pretty weeks and days of kind of feeling lonely, I heard someone cry out my name on campus, John Mackin, and I was shocked after all that time. And it happened to be the daughter of a fellow staff member that I knew, and I knew their family and their children and stuff. And she remembered me, and she called my name out. And I thought, really, looking back, that was God's way of saying, you're not alone. I'm here. You're not forgotten. So we need to go to the right doctor and understand that he's there. He also is never too busy. He's always available. You know, you don't have to use your computer to contact him and make sure you got a good connection. He's always there. In verse 33, then, the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, and trembling with fear, he told him the whole truth. You can tell Jesus the whole truth about your needs without any fear of rejection. There's no need to hide anything. He already knows it, he understands it, and he knows you perfectly. He is, as you look at that, I realize that Jesus, he's a kind and gentle and wants a relationship with us, not just to help us. I like how tender Jesus speaks to the woman, calling her daughter. It's not his daughter, but he calls her daughter. He also looks at us as his sons and daughters. Just what John 1:12 says, but to as many as received them, to them he gave the right to become children of God, even to those who believe in his name. So as I wrap up today in conclusion, when your needs seem overwhelming in life, remember, Jesus is wanting you to tap into his power, not your power. As I said earlier, these past weeks, I was waking up at night and hit by what I would say are waves of anxiety. For me, it was helpful to remember all the ways I've sought him in the past at different stages of my life, and he was there. When I was single, when I was married, when I had children, and now as I'm older, he is still there. He's always been there to reach out to for help in my time of need. And he can do the same for all of us. We just need to do those three things: admit our need, take a risk and reach out with a hopeful touch, and then go to him as the right doctor. You may be surprised, as I am at times, when he says back to you, go in peace, be freed from your suffering. As we close this morning, I'd like us to just have a moment of reflection, and I have some questions there that I'd like you to take a moment and think about these thoughts. Is there a need in your life that you want to admit to Jesus? Maybe you have it, but you've never told him. Take a moment silently in prayer and tell Jesus about your need. And then lastly, thank him that he hears your prayer. So I'm going to give you a little moment alone between you and God that you can talk to him and maybe use that few seconds, few minutes to talk with him about what I've shared today.